Thank you, TT, for your explanation of equity and inclusivity. I feel the visualizations make it very easy to understand. Before I move on, we are going to have another poll of the audience to find out if colleagues from the Bay States and further afield already have tools for mainstreaming equity and social inclusion in their policies, planning and budgeting processes. We will give participants a few seconds to respond. We will now move on to look at the PERL Equitable Budgeting Guide. So, firstly, why have PERL invested resource to produce and launch this guide? It is an acknowledgement that traditional policy making and budgeting might perpetuate discrimination and inequality. In recognizing this as an issue, the guide was developed to familiarize those concerned and involved in the budget process to fight for equity and inclusion. The guide was developed based on years of experience across a number of states and beyond the shores of Nigeria, and is reflective of experience across a number of facets. The guide introduces equality and social inclusion within the context of budgeting and explains why it is so important. It then goes on to describe the 4 stages of the budget cycle, breaking each stage into a number of steps. It provides tools and guidance to assist all relevant stakeholders to incorporate and recognise equality and social inclusion throughout the budget cycle. This includes descriptions of best practice and other useful resources. The guide can be used to adapt and potentially supplement existing budget processes to mainstream equity and inclusivity. A number of checklists have been developed and are included in sections 3 and 4 of the guide. These allow stakeholders to assess the extent to which existing processes and outputs from the budget cycle are equitable and inclusive. As noted previously, there are a number of actors involved within the budget cycle. Government, including the Executive Council and civil servants from line ministries, are key drivers of the budget process. This includes both the oversight agencies, for example, Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Planning and Budget, and those who actually collect and spend the money. Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Works and Ministry of Rural Development. This guide is also useful to State House of Assembly members, who are the key conduit between civil society and government, and have the role of ensuring policy priorities are appropriately reflected in budgets and actual expenditure. Lastly, and by no means least, civil society can use this guide to help identify the appropriate stages, steps, and mechanisms for engaging with government, with the aim of ensuring their needs are identified and appropriately reflected in the budget. The main section of this guide, section 3, contains diagrammatic presentations of each of the 4 stages of the budget, identifying the activities, outputs, and responsibilities. The diagrams, an example of which is shown on the slide, are the initial reference point for users who can then focus on the steps they are concerned with. Each step is then described in detail, identifying key equity and inclusivity considerations. These are intended to guide states to adapt and potentially supplement their existing processes and outputs to mainstream equity and inclusivity in the budget cycle. The checklists can be used as a diagnostic tool to assess the extent to which existing practices recognise equity and social inclusion, and can be used to further hone in and improve any stages and steps that fall short of what is needed. I will now hand over to my colleague Chidiebere Ide, who will give a brief overview of the content of the Equitable Budgeting Guide based on the 4 stages of the budget cycle. Thank you.